Okay, now we're going to go the other direction. We've got a graph. We want to be able to use what we know about those properties to write the equation. So here's what we're going to do. So this one asks 7a. You'll notice both a and b are asking for the cosine function. There are a couple of different things I want to point out. Please understand that cosine and sine are only pi over 2 off of each other. So anytime you've got a model like this, if you really wanted to do a phase shift, you could write it using sine. I just want to be able to do one without a phase shift and one with the phase shift, both using cosine, so then you can make sense of what's going on, okay? So the equation looks like this. So we've got a cosine b theta minus c plus d. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start by figuring out what in my mind is the easiest piece, the midline. So the midline is going to end up being right here, right? It's in the middle of the graph. The graph goes the same amount above and below. So this tells me that D is positive 0.5. My whole graph moves up 0.5, okay? So if I am looking at it that way, then this point right here on the graph, that would be the high point of my graph. This distance is 0.5. So let me use the right color. 0.5. So that means my A is also 0.5. So at my 0, my cosine value is, this very top. So there is no phase shift. So I am not worried about that. C equals 0. Now what I need to do is figure out what the period is so that I can solve for B. And if I go from this top point to this top point, that is 1 period. This looks like it is 2 pi. Now I'm going to do something that seems silly. In this case, period equals 2 pi over b. My period is 2 pi. So b equals 2 pi divided by 2 pi. Once the period changes, this becomes a little more useful. Okay? So here's our equation. Y equals, my A is 0.5. I have the cosine of, and just so we don't feel like we're leaving anything out, I'm going to put that 1 in there. We don't need that, but I'm also going to put in the fact that my C is 0. And then I will rewrite this one more time without all the shenanigans. Just making sure that we get everything in the right place. We end up with y equals 0.5 cosine theta plus 0.5. And that is the equation for that first graph. So let's see if we can do the same thing down here. Again, I'm going to start by just writing the equation I'm looking for. That just helps me make sure that I am not leaving anything out. So the high point is 1. The low point is -5. That's a difference of 6. So that midline is going to be right in the middle of that. 3 from any maximum, 3 from any minimum. There is my midline. That tells me that D equals -2. That whole graph moved down to. Okay. Second thing I'm going to look at is my amplitude. It should go above the midline and below the midline the same amount. And I'm going to make this a positive 3 so that I can make this my 0, just to help make my life a little easier. Okay. So now I'm going to figure out this phase shift. Is that what I want to do? Do we want to do the period? Let's go ahead and do the period first. Period. Oops, wrong color. So I don't have 2 maximums to check off, so I can use these 2 minimums. So this goes from -2 to +4. So my period equals 6. So 6 has to be 2 pi over b. B has to be 2 pi over 6. So my b is pi over 3. Okay. So here's the next thing I'm going to do, now that I think about it, because I have this written in my notes. I wasn't doing it that way. Cosine, I'm going to factor this b out. We looked at this one way. One time like this, because my c over b is the actual phase shift. From that, I can plug in the b that I have and figure out what c is supposed to be. So if I take a look at this, my phase shift, my maximum should be here at 0. It's over here at 1. So my phase shift so 1 equals c over b. We know what b is. It's pi over 3. Oops. 1 equals c over pi over 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by pi over 3. And we get pi over 3 equals c, which is a little unsettling because we got the exact same thing as b, which makes us question ourselves. Perfectly okay. So let's plug in what we've got here. A is 3. Keep in mind, pi over 3 times theta minus, we solved for c, so I can just plug that in right here. I don't have to worry about the c over b shenanigans. And so we get y equals 3 cosine pi over 3 theta minus pi over 3 minus 2. Keep in mind there are going to be multiple equations. I could have moved this way and made this my 0. Going for path of least resistance. So sometimes your equations may not look exactly the same as somebody else's. These are all cyclical, so every 2 pi they're just going to dump on top of themselves. You're good. Okay, one more page and then we are done with this section.